What's up, guys? We are live. You're listening to the Charm City Sideline Podcast. I'm Bradley. This is Zach, and this is Dawson. This is our first Q&A episode of the season. Well, of the regular season. We did some in the summer. Coming off the 27-20 loss to the Kansas City Chiefs on Thursday night. We've had some time to reflect. You guys have as well, and we have some questions for you guys to put in. We got some questions for you guys, and we are going to talk about them. If you're here, like the video, subscribe if you haven't already. Guys, how we doing today?
Doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I'm ready to answer some questions. I think we threw in some questions of our own this time just to get some conversations going. I'm pretty excited for those too.
Yeah. Awesome. So first one, this one is from Will_721. We'll start with Zach here. What's your biggest takeaway from that first game against the Chiefs?
Well, I wanted to talk about defense, but I think we're going to be talking about defense a lot later. So I'm starting with the O-line. My takeaway being, I think there's so much room for improvement on the O-line. I feel like the difference between the first half to the second half was drastic and extremely impressive with how they handled pass rush and got the running game going at least enough to where the passing lanes and everything else could open up the deep game. And we ended up being a competent offense by the end of it. So I feel like the offensive line was very scary. It was hard to watch at the beginning, and it turned into, you know what? Maybe it was the pregame jitters. Maybe it was the first game jitters. But we shook them off, and I was impressed about how the turnaround gave us a chance to almost win that game.
Yeah, I would agree with Zach. I mean, obviously the first half wasn't ideal, and it's not exactly what everyone wanted to see and expected to see. But we turned it around at the halftime and kind of shot ourselves in the foot in the first half a few times. And it was rough, but the second half was a pretty good game performed by this team. And I think we obviously, like Zach said, we had a chance there at the end to tie it up, and it didn't go our way, unfortunately. But overall, I think this team played a pretty solid game. We knew the offensive line was going to be kind of scary this year, and it was just that on Thursday. But overall, I think the defense played pretty good, defending, the back-to-back Super Bowl champs in their house. I mean, for the most part, it was a pretty solid game from their effort, especially with the first-year defensive coordinator. Especially the guys too that had to step up into a bigger role this year with Trenton Simpson and the guys along the O line. I think we all saw a pretty good game for the most part from a lot of those guys. But it's truth be told, it's gonna be a long season, and I'm not sweating the first week loss, but I do like what we saw from the team, and after what we saw from some other teams around the league here yesterday or not yesterday, on Sunday, I'm sorry, and yesterday, to be fair. I'm not really sweating it. I think the Ravens are going to be just fine this season, and they'll prove that moving forward.
Yeah, I think resiliency is kind of a big thing here. You go back to both times when we went live on Instagram, AFC Championship, and now Week 1 against the Chiefs. I feel like both vibes were kind of not good. We go into half against, were we down 10 going into half on Thursday?
Yeah,
and
I believe so.
Yeah.
And we still come out and they score after halftime, right? And puts us in a bad spot. But I think Ravens stick with it. We talked about this in the post-game reaction. It really felt like the Ravens were going to get blown out at a point there. I think everyone felt it. I've heard non-Ravens fans. I was watching some podcast earlier this past weekend. They said it kind of felt like that game was going to get away from them. They didn't let it happen. Credit to Zach Orr, credit to Lamar, credit to Todd Monken for sticking to a relatively neutral game plan. Some people have some thoughts about Derrick Henry, which we'll get into, but I think he stayed somewhat balanced. Lamar ended up with 41 completions. Probably not going to win too many games when a quarterback is throwing 41 passes, but I feel like honestly it was, I don't want to say surprising, but I was almost impressed by the Ravens hanging in there in that second half. So
there's like a big difference between a few years ago in our Ravens with maybe we would get up big and just hold the lead, And nowadays we tend to be in a spot where we're keeping a game closer. We're in a closer game, and it just never feels like we're really that out of it. And I felt like Thursday it started to feel like it was getting away. Like we were all texting each other like this is about to get ugly. Like we were that unsure about our team's ability to go ahead and go that. Brad, I think that was the perfect word to do it. Resiliency. I like it.
Yeah. So that was from Will _721. Thanks for the question, Will. Got another question here from God Made Noah. We'll start with Dawson here. Thoughts on how the Ravens used Derrick Henry in week 1? And I guess we'll start with that. And then the second part of the question was, how do you think we'll use him in the future? We'll talk about that after. But first of all, Dawson, what are your thoughts on how Henry was used in week 1?
Sorry, my mic was muted there. Yeah, for sure. I think this is a big question with a lot of people. Harbaugh had to reiterate after practice the other day what's going on with that. I can't really complain about it. I don't think Henry was here. Like I said, Harbaugh confirmed this after. I don't think Henry was brought here with the intentions of to give him 30 carries a game. I think we all knew that, and some people had some unrealistic expectations for this. He's an old back. I mean, he's been through a lot, and he's still good. I'm not discrediting him whatsoever, but he doesn't have the tread life to run him 30 times a game, and I don't think this team even needs it. And I mean, I forget how many exact like runs he had on Thursday night, but I know it was quite a bit. I think it was near like 15 to 20 potentially. I mean, we fell behind early in the game, and Henry's not the type of back where you know when you're behind, you run him, run him, run him. Um, I can't really complain with it. He looked pretty good. He scored a touchdown on the opening drive. He looked like typical Derrick Henry. We could have used him a little bit more in certain situations, I feel like. Yes. That's, something that people could complain about potentially. But I think overall, he's going to get a lot of touches this season. And I think you can fully expect him to get 10 to 15, maybe even 20 sometimes in games, especially if we're up. Um, but he's a running back where if you're down in a game, you're not going to see him a lot in the field because you got to cover a lot of ground pretty quick. And Derrick Henry's not really the back that's utilized for that. That's why we saw a lot of Justice Hill. I know people are going to complain about it, but I think this team knows what they're doing. I think they know why they brought him here, and I think he's going to fit this team like a glove. And it was the first game. I mean, we were literally playing the defending champs at home, and I don't think we need to overreact over one specific game. Now, if that goes on much further, then there could be room for a panic button. But as of right now, I don't see a reason to freak out.
I totally agree with not freaking out. I think that was kind of a majority of the questions that we got. So we want to also give credit to anyone else that asked about that, about Derrick Henry and his usage. He had 13 carries on Thursday. To me, that's not ideal. Sadly, in our situation, since we were behind, it meant that we weren't going to see much of him, just period. So Justice was in the game more. I feel like going into the game, we had talked so much about him and said so many good things about Derrick and his ability, especially to beat up the Chiefs in the past. And it was kind of a little like, it made me unsure of his future because it didn't start out so perfect. So against the Chiefs D-line, that's pretty good. They're just not great. We're going to see better coming up in these next few weeks as well. But I feel like Henry was just not able to be used as much. I think we're going to see a very heavy dose of him next week against the Raiders. But Harbs, I think, also mentioned we have just so many weapons at our disposal. Whoever has the hot hand is going to be the one to get it. Likely was that guy in week 1, and I feel like it could be anybody's week next week. I think Zay could have a big game. But I think Henry being an emphasis of getting I think, Dawson, you might have mentioned like 15 to 20 carries. That's ideal. I feel like that needs to be a must from now on. But that's kind of my thoughts. I feel like Henry was underutilized, but only because of the situation for the game. And it's not going to happen like that again.
Yeah, this is a good comment here. Bardock versus the world. Derrick is a pounding running back. He beats the defense up the entire game, and he's meant to take over the second half, which never happened on Thursday. Which, I mean, I agree with that, and I think you guys do too.
Mm-hmm.
Derrick Henry gets better as the game goes on because it seems like the defense gets tired and he doesn't somehow. That's kind of what some running backs are able to have success with. Think about like a Steven Jackson in the past, or maybe Adrian Peterson. Derrick Henry has that too in him. I agree with you guys. I think it was sort of the situation. when you're down 10, it's kind of hard to get your running back involved who is not exceptional in the passing game. With that said, uh, we'll start talking about right now how we think we can use him in the future. I think that we need to pass the ball to Derrick Henry more, and I think we need to run the ball with Justice Hill more. I think it was a little too predictable in that sense. I think Justice Hill had how many carries did Justice Hill have?
He had one carry.
He had
but he
one
had
carry. So
6 catches.
So think about, I apologize, I don't have the snap share in front of me, but think about how many snaps Justice Hill played. I believe he played more snaps than Derrick Henry. And one
Wow.
carry on that amount of snaps is not ideal. I feel like that's very, very predictable for the defense, and I don't think that's okay. At the same time, my last thought is Ravens are going to be leading a lot this year, and that's when Derrick Henry's most valuable. So I think he'll be utilized more in the future.
Yeah, for sure. We all kind of said the same thing. It was mainly part of the game plan of how the game fell to our table. Ravens fell behind, and that doesn't mean they're just going to run around with Derrick Henry because they're chewing off clock. And realistically, you want as much time as you can to bring the lead back, or get the lead back. I'm sorry, but it was just kind of how the cards were dealt to us, and that's a big, big, pretty much the main reason why Derrick Henry wasn't seen as much as people probably would have liked. But yeah, we're going to be ahead a lot this season in games. Hopefully this week against the Raiders. And that's when you're going to see Derrick Henry just running the ball. I mean, almost every play. You're going to see him get 20 carries a game. And I don't think it'll be a worry. I think it's, like I said, it's the first week. Let's not overreact. Let's stay on ground zero. And we know we know we're going to see this year from Derrick Henry. So I don't think we need to freak out. But at the same time, I don't want him running 30 times a game. Like, I don't want to beat him up. Like, I want him to stay relatively fresh and healthy this season. That'd be nice.
Yeah. So moving on to our third question. This one was something that Zach decided to have us talk about. So Zach asks, what do we think of the rest of the AFC North after week 1? Should we take it legitimately or should we be overreacting? Dawson, you can start with the Bengals. You can start with the Steelers. You can start with the Browns. You can take
Or
this
just the whole thing. Yeah, dude.
This is a good question, man. I swear, every time, no matter who the Steelers are playing, I feel like the team just craps the bed every time when they play
Yes.
Pittsburgh, no matter what. And that is a huge, huge credit to their coach, of course. I'm not disrespecting them at all. Mike Tomlin is a phenomenal coach. They're a good team. But I swear, every time the Steelers play a game, it feels like the other team has no idea how to play football that day. So
Yeah.
mad respect and props to them. However, I'm not worried about the Steelers this year. I said in our season preview, I think we sweep them, and I'm going to stick with that. They're not a bad team. I'm not telling anybody they are, but at the same time, they don't scare me. I mean, Atlanta looked absolutely lost, and the Steelers didn't exactly look great. So I'm not so worried about the Steelers, but huge win for them in week 1, and I swear it's a common trend with who they play against. And Cleveland, man, oh man, that game was brutal. They got smoked by the Cowboys.
Yeah.
Cowboys are a good team this year. I think we're all high on the Cowboys this year. I'm not scared of the Browns either. Deshaun Watson's a disaster on and off the field, it looks like. And he doesn't scare me. Like, that roster overall is very, very solid. And that does scare me. But it's really hard, no matter how good your team is, if your quarterback at the root of all the issues is another issue himself. Like, it's very hard to be a good team if your quarterback can't even do it. Yeah, Browns didn't look great. And then the Cincinnati Bengals, man, I feel like it's a common trend this week. They didn't look good either, and they were playing the 4-13, I think, last year, New England Patriots with an old quarterback, a rookie head coach. I mean, I don't know, dude. They were at home in the jungle and they laid a goose egg, and I love seeing it. It was great. But I'm not discrediting them either because they're going to be a really good team this year. But based off week 1 strictly, man, we are the best team in the division, and I will argue anybody get with that. But so Browns, I mean, week 1 looked bad, Bengals looked bad, and Pittsburgh made the Falcons look bad. So take that as what you will, and I don't know, dude. It's been an interesting season if week 1 was any fair of or any share of what's to come.
Yeah, my roommate's a Steelers fan, so I watched that whole entire Steelers-Falcons game.
Wow.
I will tell you, TJ Watt should have had like
He was
3
unreal.
strip sacks. Like, if penalties didn't exist, he would have had like 3
Yeah.
forced fumbles, 4 sacks. He got a lot taken away from him. He was unblockable. I think Kirk Cousins is. I think that Achilles is doing a lot more damage than I think people just expected him to be fully recovered, and he's clearly not. His stance is even different than it was last year in the shotgun. He wasn't under center at all. They have to run all their plays from pistol. So I think that's an issue for the Falcons, and the Steelers being able to play against that. And the Falcons' first game trying to figure it out, how to use Kirk and all that, was probably a little bit lucky. At the same time, their defense played insane, and Justin Fields did enough to not lose the game. So I think Steelers looked okay. Chris Boswell nailed like 5 field goals, all from a long distance. As for the Bengals, it's hard to assess because they've been bad at the beginning of the season the past like 3 or 4 years. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're 6-2 after 8 games. It's just they have started bad.
Wow.
For a while now. Sort of ever since Joe Burrow's been the quarterback. I think they'll get it together. I think Chase hadn't practiced at all. Higgins was out. I think their defense took a lot of hits. That could be a little bit rough. I'll hand it over to Zach. You can have any thoughts you have about the Browns or any other thoughts about Bengals or Steelers?
Oh my gosh, yes. Like I could talk about it for a very long time, but I'm going to summarize it a little. We had talked about it in the preview that the Bengals and their run defense really didn't like change at all. Like there was no upgrades, there was no people leaving. It was just kind of like, hey, people are coming in, they're going to hopefully do their job. It looked like good market pays and stuff. And Stevenson gets the ball 25 plus times that game, and he has a career high of a game. Like, I'm sorry, like if Rahamondre Stevenson is going to be the one to beat you, I mean, it's not good for the rest of the year. I think Chase was also kind of quiet. They had one drive where I remember watching, and he got like force fed the ball, and they were moving, but they had some. I think it was near the red zone, if not like near inside the 5-yard line. They turned the ball over. Like they just had some mistakes that were costly, and it really screwed them up. But I think the Patriots winning with Jacoby Brissett and company is it was impressive. Like it's still pretty impressive to beat a Bengals team like that, except I don't think, again, I like what you said, Brad. I think they'll still bounce back. I'm not sure it's going to be this week against the Chiefs, but it'll be sometime. The Browns, I know, right? It was such
either
a crazy game.
The Chiefs get humbled or the Bengals fall 0-2. I think it's a win-win for us. Either way, I'll be happy.
Either one. Well, I'd feel a little bit more upset if the Chiefs lost to the Bengals without T. Higgins, if Higgins doesn't play. But holy crap, that'd be some. The Browns was probably the biggest shock to me. The Cowboys just came out and throttled them from the get-go, and the Browns really couldn't get anything going. Deshaun Watson looked horrific, and maybe that's just one game. Like maybe it's like, hey, maybe Cowboys had our number and Parsons was just having a day. But Cowboys defense had whatever they wanted, and might be some really good tape for the rest of the year to beat the Browns. Steelers was also like, what the crap? Like the Falcons, I thought were supposed to be better than this.
Everyone expected the Falcons to win like 12 games this year.
Right? Isn't that weird? Like I think the whole NFL got humbled because Bijan had a good game, but like people like Drake London and Pitts were just quieter than we had expected them to be with Kirk. So I can't also talk about this game without mentioning TJ Watt. He was unbelievable. Like that was one of the best performances from a defensive player I've ever watched. Like he's was ridiculous, dude. Literally, it was a one-man show. Like he could have gone out there just by himself and won.
Record, dude.
It was unbelievable. But yeah, the AFC North is in shambles after week 1. I can't believe that Justin Fields, the game manager, won him the game. I'm so excited to see what happens the rest of the year and how this division shakes out.
Awesome, guys. I think it was a very interesting week in the division. I feel like a more interesting week than we normally get.
Yeah.
We'll see if that holds up. I'm excited for Bengals Chiefs. I think that'll be really interesting. Like Zach said, I'd definitely rather the Chiefs win just because Bengals 0-2 would give the Ravens a lot of, especially if we're able to beat the Raiders. That'd give the Ravens some cushion there. But to move on, it's a funny question from King of Thursday. He goes, "Are we cooked? We have the second hardest schedule in the NFL and started off 0-1." I'll start. My answer would be no, because you look at it. I look at it as, and again, this can't keep happening, but we played bad. We did not play well, and we lost to the Chiefs by a toenail. I think if you can be a team and play poorly and lose to the defending champions who got better this offseason, I think that's a positive. I think, also what we talked about, the resiliency of the Ravens in the second half. I also want to talk about, the O-line we think and hope will continue to get better. That's their first game ever playing together as a group. Now, I do agree about the schedule being rough. We got Raiders, then we got Cowboys, Bills, Bengals. So I think all three of us would take 3-2 after those 5. I'm not sure about you guys, but that's kind of the rough part that I agree with King of Thursday about. These first 5 games are rough.
This dude said, "Are we cooked?" That's funny. No, dude, this team is not cooked. I mean, yeah, our schedule is a gauntlet, dude, but we all knew that before the season. We knew that when the schedule came out. And no, this team's not cooked. Like Brad said, I think he nailed it on the head. I mean, we played a really poor game. Let's be honest. The Ravens played a bad game on Thursday. And I'm not going to be that guy, but the referees also didn't help our case. And the fact that we were this close from potentially tying it or winning it if we were going to go for a 2-point, which all know our head coach, we probably would have. Um, the fact that we were that close after all that stuff was against us, I mean, is realistically shows that this team has resiliency and they don't give up and they have a great quarterback who could take them all the way to the end. And a team overall that's really solid. I mean, they have so much heart and they don't give up, dude. And the fact that we were playing, the best team in the NFL and that happened it really shows a lot about what this team is made of. And I'm not worried about this season. I think we'll be okay. But, if we go through this tough stretch and we lose 3 or 4 games by week 6, then it's going to be a concern for sure. But I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I love the question, "Are we cooked?" But I just don't think so. The only thing that scares me about possibly being cooked is an overusage of Lamar Jackson. I don't want him to have to throw for 276 and run for 112 every week. Like, if he's doing that and it's super easy and it looks easy, that's a different discussion. But he was getting hit a lot in this game.
And he didn't practice.
Yeah, that also scared me. I don't like him missing practice early this week. It's like it's mostly resting on Lamar's shoulders, as it would be for most teams in their quarterback. But I mean, him being banged up throughout the year doesn't sound ideal for this offense. And I hope that pieces like Derek get going. But I think also what happened in the second half, how they took away Zay Flowers, was a little half and half. I felt a little scared about that. I don't know if it was a matchup per se that changed it, but I think that he really got taken out of the game and somehow the offense still flourished. But if we run into a team with a little better secondary help, it might be a little more difficult. I know the Bills have a good secondary, but Johnson for them just got hurt, so we might miss some time. But still, I feel like a team like that could really give us some trouble if they take away our options. And I'm just hoping that we don't overuse Lamar as the year goes on.
That's a good point about Lamar, because he took a ton of hits week 1, and not practicing because of soreness is definitely not what you want to see. So that was a good point. And also that the Cowboys secondary week 3 will be a good test with Trevon Diggs back, Deron Bland. So moving on to my question. We'll head over to Dawson first for this. What do we think of Zach Orr going forward, and what were your thoughts on his debut?
Yeah, I'm a huge Zach Orr truther, so this is probably going to be a little biased, guys. But I loved it. I think our defense looked pretty damn good given the circumstances. You got a lot of players who had to jump into a bigger role this year on the defense. You got a first-year DC going into Kansas City opening night against the back-to-back defending champs. I mean, what stakes could be higher? How can they be higher for a first-year DC? And I think they stood up to the challenge pretty well for what it's worth. I know the first half, I mean, overall there was a lot of points scored on our defense, but I think they stood their ground and they played a damn good game in the second half, and it was way better than it was in the first half. So it shows already that those adjustments, much like Mike McDonald, are still there and they can happen into the second half, helping the team fight to the very end and hopefully win the game. But I like what we saw from the players. I mean, he was aggressive and they attacked the Kansas City offense pretty well. I know there was a couple plays that they gave up that were, unfortunate with the Xavier Worthy touchdown and then the broken coverage and stuff over Humphrey. But that's going to happen. I mean, it's the first game under a new regime and new defensive coordinator. Stuff like that happens. It happened with Mike McDonald. I don't know if you guys all remember the first few games with Mike McDonald as DC was a little rough. People were calling for his head 4 games into his tenure, and then he became how great we all know he is. But little stuff like that's going to happen under a new defensive coordinator, and it has to be expected. They're not going to be lights out every game, full game. But what we saw, given who they were going up against on Thursday night, I like it, and I think it's not going to be a significant drop off. Overall going from Mike McDonald to Zach Orr, I think they played a really tough offense, pretty tough, and they didn't allow them to get a bunch, over our heads and stuff. And I like what I saw personally, and I'm not even. That's the least of my worries right now as a defensive coordinator we got in Baltimore. There's other worries that I have that are stronger than that.
Yeah, I've been a Zach Orr fan like before his injury and being a all pro level linebacker for the Ravens. So I mean it's kind of it's biased for us a little bit, but I was impressed with it. I think the second half switch up was very impressive. I think stuff like that, broken coverage and the speed of Worthy. I mean, I feel like some things weren't really prepared for as much. Maybe that's just miscommunications. Maybe that's some other stuff, but it's week one. Zach Orr is going to be fine going forward, especially playing that good of a game against the defending champs. I don't have a ton of thoughts on it because it's really early on too, but given his start to his career going against the Chiefs, the rest of this tough stretch that we're about to see, especially with a really good Dallas offense, we're going to see different parts of the defense flex their muscles, I think. I like the idea of having a test like the Cowboys and their weapons. But I think the thoughts on just week one, very impressed, and I can't wait to see what it does moving forward. I expect next week we get a lot more turnovers. I think that row pick on Mahomes was a little gimmicky. I don't think we'll get any more like that unless we got good players, and that's the reason why. But I think we're going to see a little bit more in the turnover department next week.
Yeah, the Roquan pick reminded me of the Patrick Queen pick against the Bengals in 2022, where we turned the ball over. We went turnover on downs. Lamar missed Tylan Wallace going down the sideline on a 4th down. And then you're all like, oh no, everything's terrible. We're going to lose. Boom, linebacker gets a pick in the middle of the field. It was a weird play. Mahomes, definitely a mistake there. Should not have thrown that pass. Roquan just made a nice play, scooping that ball up. I don't really think I'm going to add anything about Zach Orr because I fully agree with everything you two of you said, and I don't really want to repeat any of that.
Yeah.
So we'll move on to AO Nick's question. What are your guys' thoughts on Bateman? To me, it looks like he gives up on routes. Dawson?
Man, people are so hard on Rashad Bateman. Game in and game out. Listen, dude, this guy knows how to run routes. He's always open. In his defense, people always go on him because he doesn't get 100 receiving yards a game. He doesn't catch 10 passes. He does not, A.J. Brown-esque. Like, dude, I think he played a pretty good game. He had 53 receiving yards, and he had an absolute gem of a catch towards the end of the game to even set us up for the potential game winner. I think people are looking past that catch because how fast it all happened and transpired. that was a phenomenal catch by Bateman, and I think that's exactly what we need from him. Overall, I think he played a pretty good game on a lot of routes. He was wide open, just Lamar couldn't find him, wasn't looking his way or whatever. But again, we said this probably a week or two ago. I'm not concerned about Bateman. It's one game. We can't overreact. He's, has all the tools and has all the stuff he needs this year to be a good wide receiver. So we got to hope he goes out and produces. But I'm still big. I'm a big fan of Bateman. I'm high on him this year. And I think from what we saw on his 2 targets, I think he had 2 or 3 Thursday night, I believe. He had two catches or whatever. He did what he needed to do. I mean, he had one in the middle of the field. He got the first down, I believe, and that huge bomb all the way downfield from Lamar. I mean, beautiful throw, beautiful catch, and I mean that's all you can ask is that as long as he performs when he's called upon, and that's what he's done. So I'm still high on him, and I'm not giving up on Bate.
I wouldn't say I'm giving up on him or anything like that, but I think critiquing him is still important because honestly, it just doesn't make sense in my head how you can be such an elite player with creating separation and then not have the other stats to kind of like back up how that ends up working out. Like I it's not ridiculous to say something like, to me, it looks like he gives up on routes, because if we get all these stats that say that he's creating separation, we see it on paper that he is getting separation, see it in the game, and the stats aren't there to really bring it to fruition. I think it's okay to continue to be hard on him because he's supposed to be producing at an elite level. I think that big catch gives us a glimpse at how he is available, and he is open in the games. It's just there's connections not there. I think whenever maybe Nick says giving up on routes, there's a few deep ball pass opportunities to him that were just over his head. Maybe that does mean he was, slowing up at the end of it or something, but it could also just be a bad pass from Lamar. So I'm high on Bateman. I hope that he continues to produce this year. I like being critical of him because we need him at an elite level, especially if someone like Zay gets taken out of the game. We have to depend on him a lot more.
My only critique of Bateman, Zach, you brought it up a little bit, and it's a Nick's question. I think there are a few times where there's a deep ball. It's sort of a jump ball situation, or maybe it's a yard or two out in front. There's DBs closing in. I think sometimes Bateman can let up a little bit, and it's incomplete. Like, it's fine. But I think it's one of those situations where a top-tier receiver, or, we saw Odell do this last year. They find a way to draw a PI, or they, fight for the ball, maybe even make the catch. And I don't know if it's an effort thing. Maybe it's more of a IQ thing. Like, we saw Odell draw so many PIs last year when there was no way he was going to be catching that ball. I feel like we maybe haven't seen Zay Flowers have as many of those opportunities with kind of a jump ball in the area. But look at Isaiah. Look what he does when there's a ball in the area. He is getting there no matter what is in his way. But overall thoughts on Bateman, I think, we can't diminish that catch he made in the clutch, driving down at the end of the game. That was a great play. I think you could see a bunch of elite wide receivers not make that catch. You saw Brandon Ayuk drop a diving catch just last night. So I think we'll continue to see Bateman improve this season. I'd say this might be my favorite question of the episode coming up from Jaden. Is likely the tight end one? And what are sort of the odds you guys think likely is, our number one tight end by the end of the year, maybe even within a few weeks?
That's crazy. That's a bold question. Realistically, right now he's NFL tight end one. So yeah, he's obviously our tight end one.
Sure.
I mean, he by far and away had the best outing of any tight end in the NFL in week 1. He had 26 fantasy points. I think the second closest was like 14. No, all jokes aside, Isaiah Likely's a dog. We all know that. That dude's a really good football player. And he's another one of those mid-round picks from, I think, Coastal Carolina. And look at him, dude. He's already becoming a huge part of this offense. As of right now, no, he is not tight end one. And I don't think that's even remotely close to a possibility. You still have Mark Andrews, and he's obviously amongst the best in the league. And yeah, you look at Isaiah Likely's finish to last season, and it was incredible. He led this team when Mark Andrews went down, and no one even blinked an eye, to be honest with you. And you saw what he did, opening night in Kansas City over Mark Andrews, and it's fair to say, oh, he's tight end one now. It's fair. I'm not saying it's not. However, it's not fair to just completely overlook Mark Andrews. And I don't know. By the end of the season, I don't know because we're going to see a lot of them on the field together this year. You're going to see Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely playing together a lot. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I know if Isaiah Likely keeps this up, dude, he probably will be tight end one. And it would be crazy to think uh, because he's legit. He's come on very strong and he's been a big impression on this offense. So, you still got Mark Andrews and you can't overlook him, dude, because he's been, top three in the league for his whole career pretty much. And, just because he got injured and stuff and didn't have a great week one, we can't completely put him out. But I realistically do not think Isaiah Likely will be our tight end one come the end of the season.
I could not put that any better than that, Dawson. I mean, that was pretty much my exact thoughts. I love Likely, but given the amount of two tight end sets that they ran, I think it was just how the game shook out for him. I think if the Chiefs' game plan was to take away Mark, then someone like Likely still being available for Lamar is impressive because of how talented they are still with passing the ball and getting the ball downfield. The odds that Likely becomes tight end one by the end of the year, just from statistical wise, is very shockingly high up there now. Like I would have told you that's kind of ridiculous by the beginning of the year, maybe like I don't know, 10%, but now it's more like I don't know, 33%. It's definitely shot up. I worry for Mark because that week, given how much he has been going through the mud, especially fantasy football fans, everyone talking bad about him. We've seen in the past where the Ravens just don't get him specifically involved in games, and he's had lesser catches and target opportunities, but I'm very confident that he's going to have a bounce back few weeks here, and maybe it's the both of them being really productive. Like maybe we're not considering that. Like I think Mark is still one of the best in the biz at his position, and I think he'll keep that title until a little more notice happens.
My take on this right now would be, I mean, right now he is the tight end one. I think Dawson kind of said that too. Through one game, he's the tight end one. Through one game, he's also the best tight end in the league. So stats cannot be entirely true for what people call the eye test. But just looking at it, I mean, week one, he had 9 catches on 12 targets, 111 yards. The next highest tight end had 58 receiving yards. That was Brock Bowers. So he had basically double the amount of receiving yards as the second highest tight end in the NFL, week one. And, I don't think it's some fluke. You take away that 50-yard touchdown, and he still leads tight ends in receiving yards week one.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I think that when we drafted him, it felt like a steal. I think some people kind of talked about, is this going to be another draft where the second tight end we draft is better than the first one? And it turned out to be true again. It's kind of weird. I was talking about this with some people. It feels like Isaiah Likely is better against NFL competition than he was playing in the Sun Belt Conference at Coastal Carolina. I don't know if he's improved that much, but it's pretty insane how well he's playing right now. Yeah, he looks really, really good. And I just decided to incorporate our last question right now because I think it kind of fits the same thing. Dawson's question, it was, who's your prediction to lead the Ravens in receiving yards this year? I'm going to go ahead and say my prediction right now would be Isaiah Likely if I had to put a name. You look at, 111 yards week one, right? To be an 1,000-yard receiver, he'd need about 50 yards a game for the rest of the season. It's not that crazy. I think there's a chance Zay Flowers ends up having a 1,200-yard season. But when you really look at it, break down the numbers, it seems pretty likely that Isaiah Likely is going to have an 1,000-yard season.
No pun intended.
So, how many catches is Isaiah Likely going to have this season? Likely 80.
Wow.
No, I'm joking, just because his number.
I was about to say,
But I mean, maybe he does. Who knows? He had 9 in the first game. Like, he could easily get there.
Yeah,
I
the thing with the Ravens offense too, we all know they're very hot hand heavy. So like next week, we know Isaiah Likely's gonna get like 10 targets. Like he's gonna be really heavily part of the game plan. Like I feel like that's how the Ravens offense has always worked, kind of. Like whoever has a good week, like they're gonna be. I mean, that's a general like NFL thing, like sports thing. Obviously, the guy who's hot is gonna get the targets. But like I legitimately think like Isaiah Likely next week is gonna get more targets than Mark Andrews, get more looks than
wow.
Mark Andrews, and just like overall potentially have a better game than Mark Andrews. Like, so yeah, in Harbaugh's eye, he's probably tight end one right now, realistically moving forward, because he's,
Wow.
had a phenomenal week one. So I don't know. I don't think it's crazy either, Brad, to say that he could be our leading receiver. But I don't. I think it's Zay Flowers. I'm not even gonna. I think it's our wide receiver one. He's going to have multiple 100-yard games this year. And I think just with two really good tight ends, and Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews, eventually you're going to start to see that share 50-50 rather than what it was week one. And it's just going to be hard to outmatch the value that Zay Flowers is going to get every single week over a tight end who's realistically splitting snaps.
I'm going to like half disagree with you guys, like half. Like I'm not going to say this game is like a fluke, but like it's hard to see him. Like I couldn't tell you confidently that I think he's going to go for 100 yards again this year. Like I think that would be a stretch. I think that'd be hard to ask. Could I see Mark getting 100 yards this year? Yeah, at some point. But like I think next week I wouldn't be very surprised if Mark Andrews had 4 or 5 catches for 70 yards. Like I think that's not ridiculous. If teams are going to start game planning like that, Likely and Andrews are both very viable tight end targets for the Ravens, then I think everyone on the team is going to have an opportunity to have 100 yards any given week. Like it's I think it's just going to be all so by the flow of the game, kind of. Like I think Lamar's going to realize, oh, so they're taking out Mark this week. Oh, okay. Oh, they're taking out Likely this week. All right. Then the next guy to step up is still going to be there. I feel like since Bateman on 2 catches had 50 yards, I think we could see someone like him getting pretty high yardage week in and week out. Along with Zay. Zay had a great game in the first half and probably was going to be on pace to that big mark, given, if he had one big catch. But it's really going to be every given week for me. I'm not saying that Likely's game was a fluke, but I'm not sure about his ability to do it again unless the Chiefs or the other team wants to play him like that.
So you don't think Likely's going to have another 100-yard game this season?
I would put money on that rather than the opposite.
Really?
I don't think something like this, like that 50-yard touchdown was unreal. Like that was like crossing dudes over, step backs. Like it was unbelievable. And I think honestly, everyone on the team, maybe not Mark, but most of the weapons on the team have the ability to create that type of play given the same situation. So it's hard for me to say that Likely's going to do that good again. It's really difficult.
That's fair. I mean, I don't think that's anything that you can really debate. I mean, I don't believe it was a fluke either, but it's like, our tight end too, realistically went off for 100+ yards week one. It's not like it's a fluke, but it's definitely something like nobody saw coming. Like we knew he was gonna be good, but nobody expected Likely. Like what was his line week one to have 100+ yards? It was probably insane. Like it wasn't expected by the general consensus. I do think he'll have a couple other really good games this season. I don't know if he'll be to that magnitude, but I do think he'll have several other very good games. And I think Mark Andrews will as well. I think it's truly going to be a 50-50. And I think their stat lines this year will be very similar.
And I would just like to add, he's an inch away from a 10-catch game, 121 yards with 2 touchdowns, which
Well,
he's an inch away from that. So, and it's not like he scored a 98-yard touchdown where he mossed someone and then another safety fell as he was going to tackle him. He had a great game. And I agree with you guys. Would not be surprised at all if it's Zay Flowers. Maybe I even think it probably will be Zay Flowers. I'm just trying to say that it could easily be likely, and I think he could easily have an 1,000-yard season. So, I think that about wraps it up for our first Q&A episode of this season. Do you guys have any other thoughts you want to get out there?
No, not really.
I'm excited to preview the game. That'll be out later this week. But
Thursday night.
Yeah, Raiders. Hopefully, it's just a bounce back game.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
I'm excited just to watch it, see if the defense can flex its muscles, stuff like that.
Home opener.
Seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Seriously.
All right. Well, thanks to you guys for listening. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Be sure to check us out on Spotify. If you'd rather listen over there, be sure to rate us if you do. And we will see you guys in the next one. Peace.